Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Star Wars just changed the way we explain how the Force works, and one of the big reasons is to avoid ever having to talk about midichlorians ever again. I don't think they've been mentioned in live action since the events of the prequels.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? He could use the Force to influence the midichlorians to create life.
The interesting thing, though, is the new definition, like the new canon definition for how the Force works, is also meant to be more accurate to George Lucas's original intentions back when he was making the original trilogy, even though he's the person that introduced the idea of midichlorians during the prequels.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
So we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, I'm doing videos for all the Ahsoka episodes and all the upcoming Star Wars series. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. We're also doing the weekly giveaway too. And since I've given away all the Star Wars Echo Dots, we're going to do it for Disney Plus subscriptions. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and post your favorite moments from Ahsoka on the video so far. Careful for spoilers for everything that's happened on Ahsoka so far. But during the recent episodes, they've explained that essentially any living being in the Star Wars universe can wield the Force the same way the Jedi, Sith, Nightsisters, these new dark Jedi like Baylan, Skoll, and Shin, Hati can wield the Force. Whereas before, a lot of fans treated it as sort of like a Force-sensitive and not Force-sensitive situation where like only certain people could actually use the Force. The quote that they used during the Ahsoka series is meant to be a callback to Obi-Wan Kenobi's original definition for how the Force works back in A New Hope when he was explaining it to Luke Skywalker.
I can't use the Force.
The Force resides in all living things, even you.
If that's true, then why doesn't everyone use it?
Talent is a factor, but training and focus are what truly defines someone's success.
The Force is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy.
When Ahsoka is telling Sabine that essentially everyone has access to the Force, that includes non-human living things too, and when she clarifies that talent is a factor in people's ability to wield the Force, what she means is that any random person could theoretically train as a Jedi and gain some basic skills, but that doesn't mean that anybody can become a Jedi or a Sith or a Nightsister in the traditional sense to the level of people that you normally look at as Jedi characters. Those ones are meant to be examples of the very powerful Jedi, very powerful Sith, other Force wielders who are incredibly powerful. That's why Hu Yang had that line where he was talking about the practical barriers to entry into those types of orders. The whole idea that even the darker groups like the Sith, the Nightsisters, were very selective in that they only took people who had the greatest potential for power. Like they weren't letting anybody at all who had any kind of Force abilities into the orders. Really good example of this is the Nightsisters. Like every single woman born to the Nightsisters didn't automatically become another Nightsister. Darth Maul is a Zabrak. He was born to this Nightsister. That didn't mean that all the Zabrak people that were born to Nightsisters were trained in the Force. Darth Maul is one of the exceptions, and his brother. That's why Ahsoka was arguing with Hu Yang about one of the reasons why she didn't agree with the Jedi Order, because she felt like Sabine could become a Jedi just like all the ones that came before her, but the Order wouldn't have viewed her as being naturally talented enough. Ahsoka's workaround for that problem in present day is to just train Sabine way harder, and she'll have to spend way longer than it would normally take for someone to become a full Jedi Knight, like Anakin Skywalker, for instance, who was born incredibly powerful, incredibly talented. They kind of got into this during the Star Wars Rebels series when Kanan was training Sabine with the Darksaber. He basically said the same thing that Ahsoka just said, how Sabine could use the Force, but internally she was having trouble connecting with it because of past trauma, meaning that it was more of a mental thing on her part that she just needed to get past.
Or maybe because she doesn't have the Force, you don't believe she can do this?
No. The Force resides in all living things, but you have to be open to it. Sabine is blocked. Her mind is conflicted. She's so...
Mandalorian.
Ugh, very.
So Dave Filoni, who did Star Wars Rebels, is just bringing forward that idea into live action, and this is the new overarching definition for the way the Force is supposed to work. Part of the reason for this, for recontextualizing how the Force works and explaining how people use it, is so that they never have to talk about midichlorians ever again. The funny thing, too, is this is actually accurate to what George Lucas originally intended for the Force. Way back when he was making the original trilogy, he just had a better way of thinking about it, explaining it to people, then got a little crazy with the midichlorians and making it all about how high your count was and actually trying to quantify it. Like, your midichlorian count is a 1,000. That means that you can become a much greater Jedi than this other person. Instead of just saying that the Force was this mystical Zen type of thing, anyone could use it, but had to be naturally talented or have the will to actually do what it took to learn how to use it. This is George Lucas's original quote about how the Force is supposed to work. He says, "A lot of people get confused about the Force. They see it as some special thing that you can find and pick up and put it on your head, and suddenly you have the Force. Whereas it's always been designed so that every living being has the Force. The amount of Force, which is like talent or intelligence, is different in every person. Some of it is inherited, but it's no more than a talent. It's not something you can acquire. It's something that you have to learn to use." That's also a way of explaining how Grogu and other characters can hide themselves in the Force, like sort of block themselves from using the Force, and they slowly begin to lose their abilities and learn how to connect with the Force. Luke Skywalker had to help him get over that past trauma so that he could sort of unlock that mental barrier and reconnect with the Force and become more powerful again. George Lucas goes on to say, "I have the power to lift that cup off the table using the Force, but I can't do it unless I've been trained to do it." This scene of Ahsoka and Sabine with the cup of tea is Dave Filoni basically working in an Easter egg for George Lucas's definition of the Force, like he's making a reference to George Lucas's way of defining the Force. The other reason why they're recontextualizing how the Force works is to correct some fan-driven headcanon that goes back to the old school novels when they were making the original trilogy. So the actual term, Force Sensitive, originally came from Splinter of the Mind's Eye, a now non-canonical book about an adventure Luke Skywalker had between events in the trilogy. I think it was New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. And I don't think that the term Force Sensitive has ever been used in the same way in any of the Star Wars movies or in the live-action series. It may have been mentioned once or twice, but I really don't think that they've actually done it that much. What eventually wound up happening, though, after that book came out, fans started using the term Force Sensitive to refer to people who could use the Force versus people who could not. And it'd be kind of like me making up an explanation for something about lightsabers, even if it conflicted with something that George Lucas said earlier on, like, "No, I never intended for lightsabers to work that way, so your fan explanation isn't really valid." This was actually a surprise for me. I actually didn't realize that the term Force Sensitive didn't come from the actual movies or from George Lucas himself. Like, oh, I've been thinking of it the wrong way too this whole time. So when a lot of people were asking when the series started if Sabine Wren was supposed to be Force sensitive, it was actually an incorrect way of thinking about it. Like the whole concept was wrong from the beginning. The new official definition for how the Force works and what Huyang and Ahsoka have both personally said about Sabine are meant to explain that she can become a Jedi like Ahsoka, Ezra Bridger, any of the other Jedi. She's just so untalented that she's like that kid that you knew in school who had to work twice as hard to learn math or how to read. Eventually they got there, it just took them way, way longer and way more work. The other important thing is that even though they're trying to get away from the concept of midichlorians, those technically are still canon, so you could say that Sabine has a lower midichlorian count than someone like Yoda or Grogu. Per the Jedi Order's traditions, they would have measured her and barred her entry because they felt like her score would have been too low. It'd be like getting rejected from a college because your test scores were so low, but you could still learn all the same things that you would have at that university somewhere else, which Sabine is now doing with Ahsoka. Gonna go to Force College somewhere else that wants her. That's why Huyang made the comment about Sabine becoming a non-traditional Jedi like Ahsoka and how Ahsoka herself came from a line of non-traditional Jedi because she was trained by Anakin Skywalker, very non-traditional, he was a child of the Force, and almost denied entry by the Jedi Order. He came from Qui-Gon Jinn, who hated the Jedi Council and disagreed with them all the time, and Qui-Gon was trained by Count Dooku, who himself was a very non-traditional Jedi. In fact, he left the Order just like Ahsoka. They're not too dissimilar in that way, also like Grogu rejecting the traditional Jedi Order that Luke Skywalker was trying to resurrect at his Jedi Academy. Just to be clear though, Dave Filoni isn't completely retconning any of the concepts about the Force George Lucas introduced during the prequels, so unfortunately, we still have to live with midichlorians. But you can see how they're trying to move past that idea to find a way to recontextualize the Force so we never have to talk about them again. Plus, their new way of defining the Force and how it works is more true to George Lucas's original intent for how it's supposed to work. There's a lot of other stuff that's happening during this Sabine training arc that they're doing. Like, this is just the beginning. And I think a lot of her path to becoming a Jedi will involve what's really going on with Ezra Bridger. So really expecting a huge twist with that. I know there are a lot of theories about him secretly being Marrok or something else going on with the character. We'll probably get some answers about that part of this equation pretty soon. Hopefully episode 4, Ahsoka will break his mask and we'll learn once and for all who he really is. Do not be surprised if Marrok winds up being like a totally new, random Inquisitor character that's not anybody special. Like, he's not meant to be a canon version of Starkiller, he's not meant to be a dark version of Ezra, he's just like a totally different character. Most of the evidence is still pointing towards the fact that Sam Witwer is doing the voice when he's wearing the helmet though, and his voice is being modulated like the Darth Vader version of his voice, the James Earl Jones version of his voice. Timing things out though, if Sabine eventually does become a Jedi Knight somewhere during the events of these next couple of Star Wars series and movies, do not be surprised if we still make it through the first Thrawn movie and she has not become a Jedi yet. Like, I think they're taking their time with this. It's kind of like Luke Skywalker's progression through the original trilogy. Like, he didn't become a Jedi Knight during Empire Strikes Back. That's why Yoda was making fun of him so much. Like, oh, you think you're a Jedi Knight? That's hilarious. It really wasn't until they got to the events of Return of the Jedi and everything he went through that he actually became a full Jedi Knight. So do not be surprised if Sabine does not become a Jedi Knight till like the end of the third Thrawn movie. Hopefully they'll make it to a trilogy. I think that's the idea. They want to see how this first Thrawn movie goes, like this Heir to the Empire movie, and if it does do well, they'll do the full trilogy. My full Ahsoka Episode 4 video will post next week after they release it, and we should get some more details about what's happening with Thrawn. I expect him to start popping up in episodes in the second half of the series. I don't think they're going to wait till the very end before revealing what's really going on. There's a bunch of other big stuff coming up. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. Click here for my Ahsoka Episode 4 video, and click here for all my other Ahsoka episodes. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.